What's going on, guys? Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Amigoscode. In this course, I'm going to teach you about Spring Boot and MongoDB. If you've missed my course on MongoDB, where I teach you the essentials of MongoDB, queries, documents, collections, so on and so forth, setting up Mongo with Docker, go ahead and check the course. You can find the link somewhere here or here, and to get up to speed with Mongo. But in this course is more about building a rock solid backend using Spring Boot and Mongo for the database, right? Towards the end of this course, you're going to learn how to build a fully fledged RESTful API using Spring Boot and Mongo. So we're going to consume data from our MongoDB and then return a JSON payload to our client. And you'll see how easy it is for you to build GET requests, POST requests, PUT requests, delete requests, where the MongoDB is your database. If you're new to my channel, go ahead and subscribe. Give me a thumbs up so I can keep on recording these courses. Comment down below and let me know what you want to see next. Also, if you're not part of the Amigoscode community, go ahead and join. Over 20,000 people combined, and the community is awesome and I would love to have you there. Without further ado, let's kick off this course. Sponsor time. I want to thank Jetbrains Academy for sponsoring this course. Jetbrains Academy provides a project-based approach learning where you learn how to code by creating fully functional applications. With project-based learning, you can study programming theory and apply your knowledge by creating real working applications one step at a time. Whether you want to become a Java software engineer, Python, whether you want to learn about backend, front-end, and even more, there is a track for you. There are over 110 projects to pick from that will strengthen your GitHub profile. What I really like about the Jetbrains Academy is that they provide the knowledge map, and this is where you get an overall picture of everything that you need to learn. So you don't get overwhelmed and start Googling around, what you need to learn, for example, to become a Java engineer. So the knowledge map gives you the precise map for everything that you need to learn. Another thing that I love is, you guys know that IntelliJ is my favorite IDE. So what you can do with Jetbrains Academy is that you can code your exercises with IntelliJ. And this is really good because you can complete the projects using your IDE. So it feels like you're building and completing a project for real, which is really nice. And one thing that I want to mention is the study plan. So the study plan is divided into stages. So you'll start from the basics and then it ranks up, right? The complexity ranks up so that you don't become overwhelmed and enjoy coding. So to get started, Jetbrains Academy is offering you 3 months for free. Yes, 3 months. And the way to get 3 months for free is as follows. First, you need to sign up with my link, which I'm going to leave in the description of this video. Second, you need to complete the first stage of your project. And third, you need to complete your first project to get 3 months for free. So link will be in the description of this video. And I'm really excited about Jetbrains Academy because, to be honest, they have awesome products. And I feel like this academy is the right academy for people like you learning how to code and wanting to become a professional software engineer. For this course, what I want you to do is to practice as I teach. So that's the best way of you learning any new framework, technology that you come across. Also, if you're not part of the Amigoscode community, go ahead and join, because if you have any questions, you can post them on a group and someone will help you, including myself. And if you want to gain a certificate, go ahead and enroll on my website if you're not taking this course from my website, so you can get a certificate and show that to employers. Also, if you've missed the first part of this course, which is the essentials of MongoDB, I'm going to leave a link where you can find the course and get up to speed. Without further ado, let's kick off this course. Let's go ahead and bootstrap the Spring Boot application with Spring Initializr. So navigate to start.spring.io, and here we can bootstrap the application. So we can pick whether it's a Maven project, Gradle, the language, the version for Spring Boot, some metadata, so on and so forth. So in here, I'm going to leave everything as default. So Maven, Java, and then pick whatever version in here. So I'm just going to leave the default because this should work with whatever version is selected. Now for the project metadata, you can customize this, and then the packaging we're going to leave as jar, and then the Java version here, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to change this in a second because I've got 15 installed. So then what I'm going to do is, so I want to select dependencies. And in here, what we need is we're going to pick Lombok. So here I'm going to press Command and then click. So you can see press Command for multiple adds. So I'm going to need Lombok. So this is for annotations and removing boilerplate code. And if you want to learn about Lombok, go ahead and check my YouTube channel where I've got video on Lombok. Then what we need is, so here, Spring Web. So this allows us to build web, including RESTful applications using Spring MVC. Also, I've got a complete course on Spring MVC and building APIs with Spring Web. So here, let's just press Command and then click on it. And finally, what we need is, so here we can even search for it. So let's search for Mongo. So here, Spring Data Mongo. So store data in flexible JSON-like documents, meaning fields can vary from document to document and data structure can be changed over time. So this is what we need. So here, you can see we can also have an embedded Mongo database, but we don't need this because we're going to use Docker, and you'll see this in a second how everything will be connected and storing documents. So this is mainly for testing purposes. So here I'm just going to select this, and if I come out of this, so escape, there we go. So we have Lombok, Spring Web, and Spring Data MongoDB. So here I can click on Explore, and you can see that this is what it gives us. And I want to leave this link where you can basically just grab the exact same configuration that I have and follow along. So if I click on share, you can get this link where you can access this exact same configuration. So now what I'm going to do is generate, and then I'm going to save this, and there we go. That was quick. Now if I navigate to desktop, you can see that I do have this demo zip. So I'm going to extract it just like that, and I have this folder called demo, and I'm going to delete this zip file in here, and there we go. Next, let's go ahead and open up this demo folder with IntelliJ. So now let's go ahead and open up this project with IntelliJ, which is my favorite IDE. So in here, I've got Toolbox installed, and you can see that I do have IntelliJ Ultimate for Apple Silicon in here, right? So you can basically use either IntelliJ Ultimate or the Community Edition, but I'm going to show you why the Ultimate is by far the best IDE, because it has lots of integration, and also we can connect from our database using the Ultimate. So it has database support. For this course, I actually have a coupon code for IntelliJ Ultimate, which will last you for 3 months for free. So go ahead and basically install Ultimate Edition and grab the coupon code, which will last you for 3 months, so you can follow along and everything works beautifully. So here I'm just going to open up IntelliJ Ultimate. So I've got the M1 chip for my Mac. So here I'm going to open up this version in here, but if you don't have the M1 chip, you can just open the Ultimate. So this will be for both regular Windows and Mac users on Intel. So here I'm going to open up IntelliJ. There we go. And so that you know, we could actually basically bootstrap the Spring Boot application through IntelliJ. Here, if I go to new project, you can see I do have this window, and have a look. So Spring Initializr in here. So we can actually customize it, right? So the same settings that we had before, we can do it through here. but we already done it through the website. So let me just cancel out of this, and then I'm going to click on open. And then inside of my desktop, I've got a bunch of files. So here, demo, which is this folder in here, and then open. And then I'm going to trust this project. Just give it a second. And let me just put this full screen. And it's resolving the dependencies. And that's it, that's done. So that was really quick. Now, what I'm going to do is, so let me just open up demo folder in here and then go to source, main, Java, demo application. So let me actually increase the font so you can see everything crystal clear. So I'm going to press command and then comma. And you can actually go to basically in here, preferences, and you can see command comma. So here for the font, let me just put something bigger so you can see exactly. So let's try 36, apply, okay, and I think this is good. And also, let's go to, let me just type font in here, and then appearance. And here, let's try, let's say 34 maybe. There we go, that's bigger, and I think it's good for you. So now you can see everything properly. Now, what I'm going to do is, so this is the file structure for a Spring Boot application. And basically under demo, you have source. So this is where all of your code resides. And then you have main. So main, this is the actual code. And then test, this is all the code that tests your application. So inside of main, we have Java. And then we also have the folder for resources. So this is, for example, all the configuration files, which we're going to touch in a second. So here inside of Java, you have the default package. So in my case is com example.demo. But basically this should be, for example, your own company, for example, right? But in here we have the demo application class, and this is what you see here. Now, remember I said that I do have Java 15 installed. So let me open up the pom.xml. And this is where all of the configuration is. So this is Maven. So here you can see properties, Java, and then 16. So I'm going to change this to Java 15. And if I scroll down in here, you can see that the dependencies that we've picked. So this one was for Mongo. So Spring Boot starter data Mongo. And then we have Spring Boot starter web in here. And then we have Lombok. And by default, we get this one, which is for testing. So Spring Boot starter test. And then we have some plugins in here. So now let me just close the pom.xml and let me try and run this application. So basically you can right click, run, or you can run from here, or from here. So let me just run it. So this is the main class, run demo application. And if you get this error, so by default, the Java language level is set to 5, which is not supported. So basically what we need to do is, let's go back to the settings. So I'm going to press command and then comma in here, or you can go to IntelliJ and then preferences. And here, let me just put the font a little bit smaller. So let's just say 30 and then apply. And then in here, go to build. And then compiler, Java compiler, and I actually need to make this smaller. So let's just say 26, apply, and then Java compiler, and still small. But you can see here, for example, here, right? So target bytecode version, this is 16, but I'm using 15, right? So let's change this from 15, or actually from 16 to 15. Apply. Let me increase my font size there to 34 as it was before. Apply. Okay. Now let me close this pom.xml, and then if I run this again, this should work. And there we go. So you see that it worked, but the application in here failed to start. So here, have a look. Exception opening socket, and in here MongoDB driver core, and you can see that the connection was refused. So basically it's trying to connect to the Mongo database, but the connection was refused. Next, let's go ahead and get the MongoDB up and running, and then run the application again, and it should connect successfully. So this is all for now. Catch me on the next one. For this course, we're going to use Docker to spin up a container that will run our database. If you want to learn more about Docker, I've got a course on my website where you can learn everything about Docker. But basically, Docker makes it easy for you to test and deploy applications by simply packaging up into images and then run containers of images. Now in here on this website, so docker.com, I'm going to click on Get Started, and here, go ahead and download Docker Desktop for your operating system. So in here, if I show you, I do have Docker installed, and you can see that Docker is running. So the installation process, it's really simple. So once you have Docker installed, next what I want you to do is, under the description of this video, you'll find the content. So this content right here, so this is a YAML file, and basically what this will give us is the MongoDB. So here, the database, and then Mongo Express. So Mongo Express is just a graphical user interface client that allows us to interact with the database. And then we have some volumes here. So this is for storing the data, and then the network. So that these two containers, so Mongo Express container and MongoDB container, can talk to each other. So go ahead and basically grab the contents of it. So I'm going to press Command C. Now I'm going to go back to IntelliJ, and in here under the root of this project, I'm going to create a new file. There we go. And I'm going to call it docker dash and then compose dot and then YAML, just like that. And then I'm going to paste the contents there, and we are good to go. So now you can see that I do have in here, so check this out, I do have IntelliJ kicked in, and it knows that this is Docker Compose, and now I can just run it from here. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this, and you can see that it's actually doing a few things. It's creating MongoDB and then Mongo Express, and you can see right here, so you can see it's done. And to be honest, there we go. And you can see here the command that it actually did use, right? So it used Docker Compose. So if you want, you can open the terminal and you can say Docker Compose -f, and then you pass the file, and then up, and then dash, and then D for detached. And to be honest, this is it. So obviously I can go and basically I can stop things, but I'm going to keep things running. So let me actually show you. So here, so if I open up the terminal, and in here, if I do ls, you see that, or you can say dir if you're on Windows. So if you want to run from the terminal, you just say docker compose and then -f docker compose.yaml -d for detached. And there we go, right? It's the same thing. So I've done it through the UI. So here I'm going to hide this and then go back to my web browser. And in here, I'm going to basically navigate to localhost 8081 and check this out. So we have Mongo Express. So this is really cool. So this is this container right here. And you can see that it's listening on 8081 right here. And it's connecting to our database using the admin username and password, which is defined in here. So root user, root pass, which means that we have a database up and running. Next, let's go ahead and create the actual database that the application will connect to. Now let's go ahead and connect from our Spring Boot application to our database. So let's go ahead and open up src, and then inside we have main, and then resources, and then inside we have application.properties. So here we need to define the following properties. So we're going to say Spring dot and then data dot and then Mongo, and then here we're going to say authentication database. This is equal to admin, and I'm going to show you this in a second why it's admin. And then here we need the same, so I'm going to press Command D there, and then here is going to be username, so username, there we go, and this will be root and then user. Let's also define the password, so password, and then this was root and then pass, and let's define the database, so database, this will be Amigoscode, and we need to define the port, so Spring and then Mongo and then port, just like that, and then the default port is 27017, and finally MongoDB and then host, oops, MongoDB and then host, just like that, and this is local host. Now we have root user and root pass, so this comes from here. So from our Docker compose, we specify these two environment variables right here. So user, or actually root user and root pass. And then if I go back in here, the authentication database is admin. So here, if I go back to Mongo Express, you can see that we have this database here. And if I click on view, so basically this is the database called admin basically. Now if I click on view, and then you can see that we have users. Inside of users we have root user in here, and you can see the DB admin. So this is why we're doing that. Then the database is called Amigoscode. So let's just go back in here for a second, and I'm going to create a new database. So Amigos and then code, create, and there we go. So we have a database called Amigoscode, and the port is the default right here, and then we connect into localhost because it's running on localhost. And to be honest, this is it. Now the reason why I'm using Mongo Express is because some of you might not have the IntelliJ Ultimate, but if you have the Ultimate, you can connect to the database through here. So database, and then new, and then data source, select Mongo, and then in here localhost 27017, the default, we can specify the user, so this is root and then user, the password is root and then pass, and here test connection, and there we go. So apply, okay, and now we have a console. Now if I say show and then DBs, run it, you see that we have for database admin, Amigoscode, the one we've just created, config and local. So there you have it. So let me just click here, so introspect, and now remember before we started the application and it wasn't working, right, because it couldn't connect to the database. So let's just open demo application. So this is where we have the main class, the main method, run, and there we go. So you can see that. So in the logs in here, so all of this is Mongo stuff. So cluster created with settings, and then open connection, and there we go. So Tomcat started on port 8080, and we are good to go. If you have any questions, drop me a message. Otherwise, let's move on. Now let's learn about collections and documents. So Mongo stores documents, i.e. rows, in collections. So basically, if you've done any relational database, then this should be familiar. So documents, they are the same as rows, and collections are what it's known as tables in the relational database world. So we have in here a bunch of documents. These are similar to JSON objects, And basically these are the documents, and then the collection is what holds all of these documents. Mongo stores data records as BSON documents, and these are like a binary representation of JSON documents. So in this example here, we have a person document, right? So it's just a JSON object with some properties and values. So name, age, status, and then groups. So you could have strings, you could have numbers, enums, arrays, so on and so forth. So in terms of data types, you can have all of these data types. So doubles, strings, objects, arrays, binary data, object ID. So this is how you uniquely identify a document. Boolean for true or false, dates, null values using the null keyword, regular expressions, JavaScript. You could have 32-bit integer and then 64-bit integer using long, decimal, and then min and max keys. Next, let me go ahead and show you how to create a class and represent that as a collection, and then insert documents. Now that you know about collections and documents, let's go ahead and take this document right here and then create a collection called student, and then basically store this document right here. And basically this represents a student. So first name, last name, email, gender. Here we have address, and this is a nested object created at. So we're going to have some date in here, and then favorite subjects, list, and then total spend in books. And you can see this is a double, or it could be big decimal. So you can see that we have various different data types. So let's define this in Java code. So let's open up IntelliJ, and in here I'm going to collapse this, and for now let me just stop the application. There we go. And then I'm going to collapse resources, so we managed to connect to the database. Open up Java, and then inside in here I'm going to create a new class, and this will be student, just like that. And we said that we wanted to have a couple of fields in here. But what I'm going to do is I want to have a bigger font, so command and then comma, and here let me just say font, and then font, and here let's just say something like 44. So okay, and this is much bigger and better for you. So now let's go ahead and define the first name, so private, and then this will be string first name. We also need last name, email, and then for the gender, let me create a new class in here, and then this will be an enum, and I want to call it gender, and this for now will just have male and then female, just like that. And if I go back, so this now will be private and then gender. We also need to define address, so let's create a new class in here, and this will be address. And for now, let's just keep it simple, so private and then string country. We also need postcode, and finally let's also say city, and then swap this around just like that. And if I go back to student, so here we're going to have private and then address and then address. Then we're going to have the favorite subjects, so private list of string, and the subjects could actually be an enum, but it's fine. So favorite and then subjects. We also need private, big, decimal, total spent in books, and finally private, and then this will be zone, date, time, and then created at. So this is when this student was created in the system. Now I'm going to annotate this class using longbox. So I'm going to say at and then data. So this will give us getters, setters, constructors, and all of that good stuff. And I've got a video on Lombok if you want to learn about Lombok. So instead of us defining, for example, the constructor like this, or actually, so the constructor with all of these fields, and then the getters. So and then you'd have all the getters and setters. So you can see that all of this is boilerplate code, and also equals, hash code, toString. Basically, this does it all. So let me just revert everything, and we're good to go. So also, if I go back to address in here, let's do the same for address. So data, and there we go. Now that we have all of the models for our application, next let's go ahead and basically annotate the student class with the correct annotations, and also have the ID which resembles the primary key. In order for us to tell that this class will be a collection, and then we can also store documents inside of that collection, we have to annotate with @ and then document. So this comes from Spring framework.data.mongodb.core. Enter, and there we go. So it's as simple as this. Now if I press parentheses here and Command P, or actually you can see what it takes. So basically you can pass the value, the collection, the language, so on and so forth. But I'm going to leave the defaults in here, just like that. Then I also need to have an ID. So we cannot have a document without an ID, right? Because it should be unique. The same way with SQL and relational databases, each row has to have a unique identifier. The same with documents. So private, and here this will be a string and then ID. And what we need to do is annotate this with @ and then ID. And there we go. So now that we have everything that we need, let's go ahead and basically try and run this application and see what happens. So here, let's go ahead and basically run. So we're going to run the application, and there we go, no errors. Now let's go back to Mongo Express, and let's view the Amigoscode database. And fair enough, we don't have a collection called student, and this is because we haven't inserted any documents. So in order for us to do that, we need to use a repository, and that's what we're going to do next. If you've taken my Spring Data JPA Masterclass course, then you probably will be familiar with this step. But basically, this course is the most comprehensive course on Spring Data JPA, and it teaches you everything about Spring Data JPA repositories, relationships, one-to-one, one-to-many transactions, life cycles, how to map classes to tables, so on and so forth. So if you know about Spring Data JPA, then this step will be very familiar to you. And if you want to further learn about how to basically build all of this using Spring Data JPA, then I highly recommend you to enroll to this course, where lots of students have benefited, including Camila from Brazil, which recently managed to secure a job just because of this course. So if I open up IntelliJ, and remember I said that we didn't see any collections because we didn't insert any document. So let's go ahead and do that. So here, let me just collapse this, and in here, let's create a new class, and this will be an interface, and we're going to call it student and then repository, just like that. And here, if I put this full screen, we're going to say extends and then Mongo and then repository. Now here, so this is using generics. I'm going to say that the first type is a student, and then the second type is the data type for the student ID, which is string. And there we go. So let me just put this on a new line just like that, so you see everything. Now, this interface now extends MongoRepository. So if I open up MongoRepository, you'll see that it has all of these methods which are given to you. So find all with a sort, insert, also save all, and basically this actually in here extends paging and sorting. And if I click on paging and sorting, you can see that it has the find all and find. But more important here, if I go back, you can see all the implementations, right? So this is MongoRepository, and MongoRepository has the single MongoRepository in here, and you can see all of the methods. So this is the actual implementation, right? So save all, find by IDs, exists by ID, count. So we get all of this for free. So let me just close this and then close this as well. And what I'm going to do for now is, so let's just open the demo application where we have the main class. And here I'm going to say at and then bean. So we want to create bean from this, and this will be a command line runner. And I'm going to say runner. And here we're going to take the student repository. So we're going to inject student repository just like that. And let's just call it repository. And now this returns. So this returns a lambda in here. And inside we can do a bunch of things. But what I want to do first is, so let's create a new student. So here I'm going to say student, and then student equals to, and then new, and then student. Now here I could say student.set, student.blah blah blah, right? So if I press Command P, you can see that we have no parameters for this student. So what I want to do is, let's go back to student, and in here let's create a constructor without the ID. So here, without the ID, just like that. And if I put this on a new line, and there we go. So now we have a constructor without the ID, because this ID right here is auto generated for us. If I go back in here, so this will now complain. And now in here, check this out. We need to pass the first name. So here, let's say Jamila Ahmed for the last name, and then some random email. So jahmed@gmail.com, and then the gender, she is female, and then the address. So let's just have an address in here. So address equals to, and then new, and then address. And in here, what we're going to do is, so basically we can't really pass anything inside of this constructor. So let's go back to address, and here let's just say at, and then all our constructor. And in here you can see that now we have all our constructor. So here we have to pass the country. So let's say England, for example, and then here this will be London, and then the postcode will be NW9, for example, just like that. So we have the address, and we now can pass the address in here, just like that. And next we need to pass favorite subjects. So let's say list dot and then of, and then here I'm just going to say computer science, comma, and then we need to pass the total spent in books. So let's say big decimal and then 10. And finally we need to pass the created at. So here this will be zone date time and then now. And there we go. So now we have the address, we have the student. Now if I say repository, so repository dot, and then check this out. So we have all these methods. So count, delete, delete all, delete by ID, and then insert, save, save all, And now we can use these methods for free, right? So we didn't implement none of this. So here, let's just say insert. So we're going to insert and then a student. And there we go. Now let's go ahead and run this. So let me just rerun the application. Stop and rerun. And so you can see that demos, they never go as expected. So we have an error, and the error is can't find codec for class zone datetime. So I think this was my mistake. So let's go back to student in here, and this should be, so in here this should be local and then datetime. So local datetime in here, and there we go. So let's go back, and this will be local datetime instead of zone datetime. So local and then datetime, and let's import that, and there we go. So let's try again. And there we go. So you can see that this time it worked. So everything up and running. So if I go back to Mongo Express, and in here, Mongo Express. Now remember before, inside of the database Amigoscode, we only had one collection, and this was delete me. So we can actually delete this in a second. But now if I reload, check this out, we have student. And you can see that was so easy to implement. Now let's delete this one here. So delete me. So let's just say delete underscore me. And let's view the student. And in here, check this out. So what we have is one document, and you can see Jamila Ahmed, email, female, the address, which is an object in here, computer science, and then total spend in books. This is 10. So let's go back for a second here, and let's just add one more here. So let's just say maths, for example. And then reload, and this will actually create a second student. So there we go. Go back, reload, and there we go. So now you can see that this is a list, so computer science and maths. So this is actually looking very good. So you can see we have the date as well. Yeah, so it was my mistake. You can't really use zone date time with Mongo, so you have to use local date. And in here, we can actually even click on the object itself, and you can see that this right here represents the initial JSON object that I've showed you earlier in this course. So you can see all of the fields. The address is a nested object in here, and we also get the created in here with an ISO date, and also the class in here. So there you have it. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop me a message. Otherwise, let's move on. Let's go ahead and add an index to speed up the queries when searching by email, but also to guarantee uniqueness on the email field. If I go back, and we have two documents, and in here we have this first one right here, and you can see the email is the same. So both on this one here and on the second one. So let's actually change our collection and enforce a unique index on the email. And this will also speed up the queries when searching by this field. So here, if I go back to IntelliJ, and in here, you saw that we use the document, ID, but here on the email, we can say at and then indexed. So this comes from Mongo core, just like that. Now inside, I can basically specify a few things. So you can see there, Boolean, unique, and then the default is false. We can specify the direction, and you can see the default is ascending. We can have the sparse, name, background, so on and so forth, right? So even expire after seconds. But what I want to do here is I want to say unique, and then this will be equal to true. And now let me go back to Mongo Express, and in here, let me just delete this document. So let's just have one document. There we go. And in order to enable the creation of indexes, we need to open up the resources folder, application.properties, and then here I'm going to say auto, and then we should have index. So here, so this one, auto index creation. There we go. And then I'm going to say true. So now let me open up the demo application. And remember, we have this command line runner, and basically it inserts a student. So now if I right click and then run, so this time it should fail because the email, so this email right here is already taken. So you can see that it did fail, and have a look. Duplicate key, error, and then collection. So this is really cool. And you can see here, so that's the duplication, right? So this email is taken. Now what we can do is, so basically let's change the logic in here for a second. So we can say, so here we can say repository dot, and then here there is no method that allows me to find by email, right? So we can only find by ID in here, and we can't really find by email. Next, let's go ahead and learn how to create custom queries. Let me show you two ways that you can use Spring Data MongoDB to perform queries. The first way is to use the query object. So here, let's go ahead and say query, and this comes from Mongo core. And remember, we said that we want to check that if the email exists, right? If it does exist, then we don't have to insert. So here, let's just say query equals to new, and then query. Now with the query, what we can do, we can say query dot, and then check this out. So here we can say add criteria, comment, fields, so on and so forth. But what I want to do is I'm going to say add criteria, and then the criteria that I want is criteria, and then dot, and then I can say where, so where the key in our case is email. And then check this out. From this point onwards, I can actually chain. So here I've got a bunch of methods. So is, and, like, in, exists, greater or equal, intersects, in, less than equal, not equal, near, not in, not, regex, and you can see size, type, all, and basically a bunch of methods, right? So what I want to do is say is, so is, and then the email, so this email right here. So let's just extract this to a variable, and that's the email there. And now here I'm going to say email, just like that. So if you want, you can also chain, right? So here I can say dot and, right? So I can say and then I can say another key, so on and so forth, right? But you get the gist. So here, what I want to do now is I want to take the query and then use Mongo template. So Mongo template allows us to basically use queries, and you'll see how we're going to change this later with repositories. But in here, let's just inject. So in here on this line, I'm going to say at, or actually comma, and then Mongo, and then template. So now we injected Mongo template, and now I can say Mongo template dot, and then find, and you can see that we can pass a query. So the query will be the query, and then comma, and then student dot, and then class. And there we go. So this find method in here, you can see that it returns a list. So let's just extract this to a variable. I'm going to say students. Now here, we technically should just have one. So I'm going to say if, and then students dot, and then size is bigger than 1, then we have a problem, right? So I'm going to say throw new illegal state exception, found many students with email, and then plus, and then email. So technically this shouldn't happen because we have the index, but it's always good to code against it. So now we have two options. We can say if students dot, and then is, and then empty. So if it's empty, we just add it, right? So we can even say else, but it doesn't really matter at this point, right? Because we just really care whether we haven't got a student, right? So if we don't have a student, then we insert. Now let's just test this logic. So here I'm going to basically add a system.out. So here south, and then inserting, and then student, and then plus, and then student. And here I'm going to say else, and then south, and then student, and then plus already exists. And there we go. So now let's actually test this. So we already know that we have Jamila Ahmed with this email right here. So if we try to run this code, it should basically print this line. So let's just start the application. Fingers crossed. And check this out. So here you can see that this is actually a long log line, but you can see already exists. So this is working beautifully. So if I now basically delete, so let's just delete the student again. And now let's just restart the application. And you can change the log line if you want, but you can see here inserting student. And then basically if I go back in here, go back to Amigoscode, and then let's delete this collection here so we don't need it. Delete me, delete view, and you can see that it works beautifully. So there you have it. So this is how you use the Mongo template. Now obviously this is one way of doing things, but you should really be using this when you're not using the repository in here, so student repository. So next, let me go ahead and show you yet another and much more simpler way that we can write custom queries. We wanted to have a custom query where we wanted to check basically whether a student existed by email, and we wrote this query right here, and then we had to use Mongo template in here, and then this gives us a list, and you can see that we had a bunch of logic in here just to check whether it's there or not, right? So how can we improve this? So if I go back to student repository, so in here we can have queries from method names. We can have an optional, so optional, and this will be student. And in here, check this out. I can say find, and auto completion is kicking in, right? So here I can say find, and then I can say basically student by, all, by, distinct, top by, and you can see that we have a bunch of methods. So here I want to say student and then by. So I want to have one student because I'm returning an optional. If you're using this second method, then you have to return an array or a list, right? So here I'm going to say by, and then if I press Control space, you can see that it's picking all the fields from our student class. So address, and if I scroll down, created, and then here if I keep on going, email right here, if I keep on going, favorite subjects, and first name, so on and so forth. So you get the idea. So here I want to say email, and we even have further methods, right? So it's really simple. You can see that basically we're just expressing in plain English the actual query, and then under the hood it will give us the raw query without us having to create the queries ourselves. So here you can say after, before, between, containing, equals, false, greater than, in, before, containing, and you can see that there is a bunch of methods. So not, like, is null, is true, regex, not containing, and basically you can see that it's really powerful. So really what I want to do is say find students by email, and then the email is a string, so email. So this is what we pass, right? So this is the value that we're going to pass in a second. And to be honest, this is it. So now if I go back to the demo application.java in here, so now you can see that we had a bunch of logic in here. So here, basically, let me just take all of this right here, and then I want to say extract to a method, and then using, and then Mongo template and query. So let me just now comment this out so you can have for reference. And I've got a mistake, so template, and I can even use auto completion there. There we go. So now instead of having all of this logic, and this also should be like this. So there we go. So now instead of using all of this logic with the query, I can just say in here, so I'm just going to say the repository that we already have, and then because that was an interface that gave us a bunch of other methods, we created yet another method, and you can see here our own method. So find student by email. Let me pass the email. Then this returns an optional. I want to say dot, and then you can see that we have a bunch of other methods. So if present or else, and you can see or else throw, stream, so on and so forth. So here I'm just going to say if present or else. So if present, I do have the student right here. So there we go. And then or else, this is a lambda or a runnable, and this is like this. So now I'm going to take this system.out.line. So if it's empty right here, basically everything. So I'm going to take everything here, and this is the empty part. And if it exists, I just want to print. So is this part right here, and then paste that. And this will be, let's just call it student. Or I think we just have to call it S. So here S, and there we go. So you can see that it's much easier, and we basically cut down a lot of code, and also the query. So if I go back to the interface, so here student repository, you can see that from this point onwards we can actually have a bunch of other queries. So if you want a list, for example, you say list, and then of type student, find, and you can see that you can basically construct your queries. So I'm not going to do this now, and let me just remove that import. And also if I, for example, type int and then press Control and then space, you can see all of the queries that we can have. Find student by ID, count all, delete, exists, so on and so forth. And let me just say void, for example, and oops, and then press Control space, and you can see basically it's the same thing here, right? And more important, if I just say, for example, test in here, actually I just went to say test, right? So in here I can actually say, so I can say at, and then query, and then in here, I can actually use MongoDB queries, right? So these are like raw queries that you can use with MongoDB. And if you want to learn more about create, update, delete, so all the CRUD operations with raw queries, check my free course on MongoDB where I teach you all of this. So you can see that you have a couple of ways of doing things here. So let me just delete everything here and then remove the import. And if I go back now, and then let's rerun the application. So just like that, and reload. And I can even put this in one line. So just like that. There we go. You can see that student. And then if I scroll all the way to the right, already exists. So you see that it's the exact same behavior. So if I now, so let's actually, in here, let's delete this document. So we already have Jamila, so let's remove her. For some reason, I think it deleted the database as well. But I think if we basically, let's just, I think by default with Mongo, if the database doesn't exist, it should create the database. So let's just see. I'm quite sure that this is the case with Mongo Shell, so it should be using Spring Boot as well. And there we go. Of course, this is the exact same thing, and you can see that inserting student. And right here, if I reload, we can see that we have the database. And then here, if I open up Amigoscode, Collections, and you can see that it's working beautifully. So there you have it. You now know how to use the query as well as implementing your own methods right here inside of this repository. So I'm going to leave some documentation where you can go and explore other ways that you can basically have your own queries. But as I said, I cover all of this in this course right here. So Spring Data JPA. So if you know Spring Data JPA, which is way more popular than Mongo, then all of this should be really straightforward. So now that we have the necessary skills, let's build an API that clients can consume. Now let's go ahead and build an API that will talk to our Mongo database. So what we're going to do is have basically clients right here, and the clients that can send requests. So these are HTTP requests, and basically we'll have the API layer which is responsible for handling these requests. Then the requests will flow through the service layer. So this is mainly for business logic, through the data access layer. So this is responsible for talking to our database, and then send the request back to the client, and the client will get a response right here. So depending whether you are building an Angular application or a React application, or you just have some clients really that want to consume your application where the backend is a MongoDB, so this is the perfect scenario. Now, if you want to learn more about how to build this entire thing using Spring Boot and basically the basics of Spring Boot, so on my website, I do have this course in here. So if I go to courses, and in here, there is so right here, getting started with Spring Boot. So this course is absolutely for free. And here you basically learn this entire thing using also Spring Data JPA. So you can see, you know, the difference, and also connecting to a relational database. So this will teach you the core of Spring Boot if you're not familiar with this step. And also, if you want to grab this diagram right here, you can find a link under the description of this video. Next, let's go ahead and start building all of this. Right, let's learn how to build all of this. So back to IntelliJ, and in here, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to start from the API layer. So here I'm going to create a new class, new, and then a class, and this will be student and then controller. And then here, I want to say at, and then the rest controller, and then at request mapping, and this will be API v1 and then students. Then in here, I'm going to have a method. So let me put this full screen. I'm going to have a method that will return all the students. So public, this will be a list of, and then student, and then I'm going to say fetch all, and then students. Now this will be really simple. So in here, we're going to have private, and then final, and here I'm going to say student, and then service, and we're going to create this in a second. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say at, and then all our constructor. So now I'm going to say student service, or actually return student service dot, and then get all, and then students, just like that. And then we need to annotate this class, or this method in fact. So this method here with at, and then get, and then mapping. Now let's create this class right here. So student service. So in here, I'm going to open a project, and in here, I'm going to create a new class just like that, and then call it student, and then service. There we go. And this guy right here needs to have this method. So get all students. And there we go. So right now we're going to return null. But what we need really is to have the repository in here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say private, and then final, and then student, and then repository, and there we go. So put this full screen for a second, and then here I'm going to say at, and then all our constructor, and then I want to say at, and then service, so that Spring initializes this class as a bean. Now instead of returning null, you guessed it right. So I'm going to say student repository dot, and then find all. And you can see that was really easy. So if I basically go back to the controller, and that's done. So if I show you the diagram for a second, in here, we actually have the API layer with one method, which is this guy right here. And then we have the service layer, which is the student service. So here, student, and then service, which is this guy. There isn't much business logic going on, but it just basically uses the student repository, which is this guy right here. And this is responsible for talking to our database in here. Now let's go ahead and start the application. There we go, up and running. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my web browser. And in here, I'm going to say localhost, and then 8080/API. /v1/students, enter, and check this out. So you can see that we are getting back the data from our MongoDB. So this is really awesome. So you can see Jamila Ahmed in here. So female, address, favorite subjects, total spending books, and the created ad. So basically it's everything within our database. So here, if I just zoom out a little bit, so you can see that in our database, she lives here. But basically now we are exposing all of that data through an API, which is really, really awesome. So let me go ahead and quickly explain again what we've done here. So in here, what we have is, so I think this is the most important thing here. So student controller. So in here, if I put this full screen, so this REST controller basically makes this class as a class to serve HTTP requests from clients, right? So we can have basically methods and then annotate them with HTTP semantics, either get, post, put, delete. So here you see that we have get mapping. If you want post mapping, so if you want to basically insert a new student, you say post mapping, so on and so forth. Delete, to delete a student, and put, to update. And then basically that's it, to be honest. And then all our constructor, so in here, so this is Lombok. Instead of us doing this, so here, let me just show you quickly. So if I do this constructor, you see that it's the exact same thing, but I'm just reducing boilerplate code. So let me just delete that. And the request mapping, so this is localhost API v1 / students, and this is what you saw in here. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop me a message. Otherwise, catch me in the next video where I'm going to give you an exercise. Right, I want to thank you so much for sticking around with me throughout this course. So if you want to take the full course on MongoDB, go ahead and enroll. I'm going to leave a link under the description of this video where you can basically master MongoDB as your backend, right? So MongoDB, it's super simple to use, yet powerful and scalable. So in the course, you'll learn pretty much how to set up your MongoDB, how to fine-tune database administration, queries, including CRUD, operations. You will also learn about indexes, so how to speed up your queries. And more important, I'm going to show you how to use Mongo Atlas, which is a database as a service, and we're going to deploy a MongoDB database running somewhere on the cloud, and more specific on AWS. And then we're going to write some JavaScript code that will connect to our database. I'm going to show you pretty much everything that you need to know in order to be rock solid with MongoDB and build applications fast. I had pleasure teaching you, and I'll see you on the next one. Assalamu alaikum.